What are the characteristics of a NoSQL database? I mean, how do you define it?
Yeah, it's the classic characteristics of NoSQL database are really that you don't have any schema. That's probably the thing people think about first when they look at NoSQL. And it's worth remembering that NoSQL, it's for most of us we say it's not only SQL. So the NO is not saying don't use SQL. It's not only SQL. And the parts of we're saying not only is let go of some of the schema, embrace other aspects of what your data storage should be like. The models within the NoSQL database world end up being very dramatically different. So you have, everyone knows what the relational model is, but within NoSQL, you have a couple different models that people end up working with. So it's not a relational model, and it's no longer having a schema, and then of course querying is different.
Now, your session description says that there's 4 main categories of NoSQL. What are those?
Yeah, so the categories that we see within the space are really modeled along different ways of storing your data. Either you have a very simple model that is just key value stores, and at that point you really just have a giant hash map that's distributed. If you elaborate that model a little bit and you realize, well, for the values I have, we've got some common categories of those of the data, and maybe we know a little about them. We actually know that they're kind of like little flat tables. That ends up being the column family stores. And if you elaborate that a little bit more, and realize, well, for each data record that I'm storing, I want to have a little bit more information than just a flat couple of data columns. Let's have a tree of things that we can store. Well, that tree ends up becoming a document, and then you have your document databases. And then if you take the document database and you realize, well, actually, I don't have just individual data records here. These things are related in different ways. I want to be able to connect them. I realize that, you're my friend. I want to have a way of expressing that. That ends up becoming a graph then. So throughout the NoSQL space, you simply elaborate a little bit on a data model and have it be a little bit more expressive at each different category, and then you achieve different, data that you can represent.
What do you feel are the most promising NoSQL options that are out there now?
It's a really hard call to make, I think, at this point, because certainly as we say, not only SQL, within the group, we're actually very on the same page as thinking that this is a time when you don't really have to have one great solution. As it is true for languages these days, that like if you're working on the front end, you might use JavaScript, but on the back end it might be Ruby. It's the same thing with databases these days. You might still have a relational database, but then you might add a key value store for parts of it. And then you might add a graph database for other parts of it. And you'll have a document database doing other parts of it. It's really a polyglot universe for both languages and also for database storage. So I don't know that there is going to be one true database that will end up being the most promising of them.
So last question for you. How do you see the NoSQL landscape shifting over the next few years? I mean, do you anticipate broad enterprise adoption, that sort of thing?
I do, actually. So obviously right now it's a lot of early adopters who are using this technology, a lot of web startups who just want to use the latest fun stuff, and of course those people will be using the latest tools available. But for enterprises to really adopt these things, what we'll end up seeing more and more, and enterprises actually already are using them, but there'll be tooling built on top of these tools upon these data stores to make it even easier for enterprises to use them, so that not only the programmers but also the DBAs that they already have and their business people who understand how to think in data can do things with these data stores. It's not just for coders anymore, as some of the current technologies kind of require.
Great. Well, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate you taking the time.
Thanks. You have a nice day.
You too.